Keep listening for This Just In from Outdoors, environmental news from the Monterey Bay, only on KZSC Santa Cruz.
KZSC.
Now, young fellas, been having a lot of fun around here today, haven't you? You know what makes this all possible? This forest around us. We should all be thankful for our forest.
You're tuned in to This Just In from Outdoors. Thanks. Today we learn about how much longer Santa Cruz has until its landfill is filled and what county officials are doing about the looming deadline. Plus, another look at the natural history of our homes. With the environmental news, headlines, and more, stick around.
This Just In
From Outdoors.
Most Santa Cruz residents are aware of the large, dense, unsanctioned homeless camp situated between the San Lorenzo River and the Gateway Plaza, adjacent to the River Street entrance to Highway 1. Jessica York of the Santa Cruz Sentinel reported this week on the camp, which many local citizens and business owners are protesting due to claims of feeling endangered and worried about the environment. York interviewed Miguel Portillo, a resident of the camp, who is struggling with drug addiction. He cites dense camps like these as trouble and dangerous for overcoming his addiction, but it is the only place he can stay outside without receiving a ticket. "I want to find a place to stay and work. I want out," he said to York. Although the camp is not sanctioned by the city, they are providing portable toilets and hand-washing stations, with 2 more wheelchair-accessible units scheduled to come soon. Details are fuzzy, but there may be more assistance in store. Santa Cruz County jurisdictions and homeless service providers are working on an application for a $10 million grant from emergency state funding to help alleviate homelessness issues.
A news article by Yale Environment 360 follows the story of a teenager who has removed over 50,000 golf balls from the ocean in the Monterey Bay Sanctuary near Carmel. This teen, Alex Weber, is now studying the dangerous effects of the plastics and toxins that come from these balls. Over the past 2 years, Weber has taken around 2.5 tons of golf balls that were once on the ocean floor polluting the surrounding area. Weber has recently teamed up with Stanford University and their scientist Matt Savoca. Savoca studies plastic ocean pollution, and together they are finding the harmful effects that are caused by these golf balls. These balls have been found to have zinc compounds in them, along with microplastics that, when degraded, can be consumed by marine life. Since the golf balls sink, it's hard for most people to even see the damage that they are doing to the ocean, as you must be submerged to see the extent that they cover the ocean floor. This goes to show that a great deal of environmental damage may go unseen, even within plain sight. If you would like to read more about the topic, Weber has recently helped put out an article on the golf ball's harmful effects in the Marine Pollution Bulletin Journal.
ABC 7 News reported new developments in restoration on a North Bay area treasure. If you have visited Marin County, you most likely spotted Mount Tamalpais. Mount Tam is home to Muir Woods National Monument and beautiful golden hills that roll into the blue Pacific Ocean. But there's a long-forgotten and ecologically disturbed spot atop the West Peak. That spot is a military base from the 1950s that was used as a radar station to prepare for Russian bombers. However, this base is unused and has been obsolete since the 80s. Marin County State and National Parks Departments are working with One Tam, a coalition of nonprofits, to restore the land that was destroyed when building this 100-acre cement base. One Tam initially wants to remove pavement from the base. Removing pavement will improve catchment and filtration of rainwater. This protects Marin's watershed because it is just below the military base. The county plans to restore the habitat so rare native plants can flourish again. This project will cost $13 million, which is expected to be covered by grants and donations. This is an exciting project that ends the era of military intrusion on Mount Tam and restores the sacred land.
David Schmalz for Monterey County Now covers the topic of the newly passed court ruling on having a science-based limit for the amount of anchovies allowed to be caught. Conservation groups have been fighting for a limit on the fishing of anchovies due to their role in feeding other marine life in their ecosystem. After this court case, the amount of anchovies allowed to be caught will be based on data gathered from the anchovies population and the population it feeds within its own ecosystem. This will hopefully keep them from being overexploited and harming the rest of the ecosystem that depends on them as a life source. Oceana, a conservation prophet for marine life, led this fight with a lawsuit against the federal government. This new ruling is supposed to take place by April 18th, despite the government shutdown that has taken place within this month. If this is implemented by then, there will be more control on their population without it being lowered too much due to overfishing. This has the potential to help the fellow members of the Anchovy's ecosystem within the Monterey Bay and the rest of the West Coast marine wildlife as well.
Public transportation for downtown workers in Santa Cruz will be undergoing changes in the near future. Last Thursday, the Downtown Commission of Santa Cruz decided on their preferred package of alternative transportation incentives, which would be targeted toward downtown workers. The two alternatives emphasized the most were increases in bike and bus use, an unsurprising decision for Santa Cruz, which, according to an analysis of 5 years' worth of federal data, ranks among California's highest rate of bike commuters for cities. This decision by the Downtown Commission comes months after the Santa Cruz City Council approved a proposal to begin setting aside $300,000 a year in funds designated for, quote, transportation demand management efforts, end quote, a ruling which was handed down in September of 2018. KZSC spoke with a transportation planner to get more on this story.
Claire Fleisler, transportation planner for the City of Santa Cruz. The Downtown Commission last week reviewed our second annual Downtown Employee Commute Survey and our proposed recommendations for how to spend a budget to encourage downtown employees to not drive to work. As the result of that, the Downtown Commission made a recommendation to City Council, which would implement what we're calling Staff Scenario 3 and a transit component. Staff Scenario 3 includes some really, really cool funding elements, including bike link card subsidies that you can use at the bike lockers, subsidized memberships for the Jump Bike Share system, incentives and encouragement activities. So if you track your commute and say maybe one of our challenges would be you carpool 10 days out of the month, you'd be entered to win a prize from one of our downtown businesses. So those are the really cool, wide-ranging, meet people where they are transportation proposal. The Downtown Commission also elected to add in an additional $217,000 to fund transit passes for all 4,000-ish downtown employees.
The Downtown Commission proposal will be sent to the City Council for final approval. When asked if she is anticipating the downtown proposal to pass, Claire had this to say.
The additional investment in transit, the additional $217,000, is an expensive program element that goes above and beyond what we had budgeted for a 3x increase in transit ridership. So I'm not sure what will happen. I think it's a really exciting time that we're able to talk about what these investments are in non-single occupant vehicle alternatives. And I'm excited to have the conversation.
Across the Santa Cruz County, people driving to work by themselves made up more than 69% of commuting workers on average. Within Santa Cruz City, upwards of 58% of workers drive to work alone. In the downtown area, that number is 66%. An intended goal of the Downtown Commission proposal is as Claire describes.
We want to have 50% or below of our downtown employees driving alone to work.
The Downtown Commission's due date for that goal is 2021. Asked about the environmental impact expected from the future of transit in Santa Cruz, Claire responded,
transportation is one of the largest sectors of greenhouse gas emissions worldwide, nationwide, and here locally. And the more that we can do to minimize our greenhouse gas emissions, the better it will be for our planet overall. One of the things I'm really proud of, a report just came out, and the City of Santa Cruz, for the last couple of years, we've been promoting the idea that we have the second highest rate of biking in the state of California. But the most recent census report shows that we have the second highest rate of bike commuting in the United States of America. It's something that I try to shout it from the rooftops as much as possible because we've made amazing progress in our investments in infrastructure and programs to promote alternatives to the automobile, and they're really paying off.
Tim Goncharoff is the Zero Waste Programs Manager for the County of Santa Cruz. He is in charge of recycling and solid waste programs with the aim of helping the county to achieve their policy for zero waste. We talked with him about the Buena Vista landfill, the future of composting, and what each and every one of us can do to help reduce our waste and to contribute more towards a sustainable society. Camille Capasso and Mackenzie Morris bring us the interview.
We are curious what the status is of the landfill that is managed by the county. I've heard rumors that it's getting too full. What does that mean, and what do you guys view as the current status of it?
We're getting there. The county has one landfill left, the Buena Vista landfill down near Watsonville. There used to be another landfill up in the San Lorenzo Valley that was closed some years ago, and it now operates as the Ben Lomond transfer station, which means trash and recycling gets dropped off there, but then it's all collected and moved somewhere else, often to the Buena Vista landfill. By our current estimates, we think we've got about 12 years of space left at Buena Vista. That is not much.
Wow.
And there's some moving pieces to that. One of our big efforts right now is trying to get as much organic waste out of the waste stream as possible. Mm-hmm. We actually just did what we call a waste characterization study, where we picked through all the trash for days and days to figure out what is really in there. Wow. And we found that about 40% of our waste stream is organics that could be separated out and composted. So we're working hard at that. And if we're successful, that will add some lifetime to the landfill. But one way or the other, we're going to run out of time.
Yeah. Wow. So I know some cities have like a compost that's run by the local government. Is that something that we're interested in?
We're kind of doing that now. We've been collecting food waste from local businesses since 2006, so we've been doing this for a long time. Oh. We used to compost it right there at the Buena Vista landfill, but getting permits from the state to do that is surprisingly difficult. So we're still running that program, but we now send the food waste down to Monterey County to a processor there. We also collect mountains of yard waste, leaves, long clippings, wood scraps, things like that, and that all gets processed separately. So none of that goes into the landfill. But we are working hard to try to develop a local composting operation. We have designs, we have plans, and we just have to go through a very arduous state and federal permitting process before we can open for business.
So that composting facility, is that going to deal with the bioplastics? Because I know we can't really compost that in our own county.
It will. There are a lot of different ways to compost, and one of the challenges is, as you say, bioplastics. There are other challenging materials. But we're trying to design this facility to have the maximum capability possible. So we do intend to be able to compost bioplastics and lots of other materials.
And this facility that you're talking about, where is it proposed to be built?
We're still looking at a couple of sites. Most likely, it will be located at the Buena Vista landfill. We have identified a space there that we think will work, that we think will meet all the requirements of the various agencies that have to sign off. So now we're going through that process to see if we can make them all happy. It's very challenging. The state is pushing hard on all cities and counties to develop these projects. There are new laws and new state regulations saying you have to do this. But ironically, there are other elements of the state government that are not big fans of composting, and they make it hard. You'd think they'd all get on the same page, but not so far. So it makes the process really challenging.
Yeah, so you're being basically told you have to do this, but there's a bunch of roadblocks to actually getting there.
Indeed.
How does waste management overlap or differ between like the city of Santa Cruz and the county of Santa Cruz?
It's a good question. We meet on a regular basis with our colleagues from the various cities and from the university to talk about how we can work together. Right now, we're having meetings to talk about composting. Is this something that we're all going to do separately? Can we work together? Is there synergy in developing one or a few projects to meet everybody's needs instead of everybody doing their own thing? And we do that with other kinds of programs as well. So we work pretty closely together.
That's good. And that makes sense. Everyone overlaps.
Sure.
It wouldn't make sense to have a bunch of different little ones if you could all utilize the same one.
And the state is a big force behind that. The regulations mount year by year, and the costs of meeting them get higher and higher. And so we're always looking for efficiencies. And there may come a point where it doesn't make sense for us all to continue doing our own thing. So I think the cooperation will get closer and closer over time.
Definitely.
That kind of made me think like compost carpooling in a way. Are there other things that you would maybe want to say to our listeners about waste management, maybe things that you can do?
Oh, yeah. Don't get me started. I'll talk all day. But let me share just a few quick things.
Yeah.
Everybody's heard about what's going on with China and the turmoil in the global recycling market. And that's created all kinds of challenges. It's become much harder to recycle certain things. The money that we used to get for some recyclable materials has just about disappeared. So, we have to find other ways to pay for these programs. And one result is that everybody's recycling a little bit differently. The county, because it's pretty big and because we use a big waste hauler that also services a bunch of other cities and counties, we can still recycle materials. We can find markets for things that some of the smaller operations really struggle with. So, for example, in the city of Santa Cruz, if you live there, where I do, they're telling residents that we don't really want most of your plastics anymore. You can just put that in the trash. Whereas in the county, we're still accepting it all and recycling it all. And people get confused. Why is it different in this place from that place? Yeah. And if you go to Capitola or Scotts Valley or Watsonville, it might be different still. So to give a simple answer to that, it's that we're all doing the best we can. Everybody's finding their own solutions, and we try to make it as simple and straightforward as we can. But if you have questions, call your local recycling office and ask. And everybody's working hard to solve these problems. There are new recycling facilities going up all the time, new rules, new incentives to get producers to produce less waste. So hopefully this is just a temporary problem. A lot of our efforts are focused not on what do we do with the stuff when everybody's done with it, but about how can we reduce waste up front. Bring your own whenever you can. Bring your own bag to the store. Bring your own water bottle. Bring your own coffee mug. We've just gotten used to the convenience of lots of single-use disposable products that sometimes we only use for a few seconds or minutes, and then we throw them away. It's just incredibly wasteful, and we rarely stop to think about it. We've grown up with it, and we've gotten used to it. But there are better ways to do it. So, think about how you use products, what you buy. Remember that if you buy something from a local business, not only are you helping provide local jobs and keeping money in the local economy, but you're cutting way down on waste. We've all seen the packages that come from Amazon and other online suppliers, and there's so much cardboard and paper and plastic that as soon as you dig your little product out of the package, you've got to get rid of. You don't have to deal with that if you shop locally.
Well, thank you so much for meeting with us and
pleasure.
Speaking with us about these important issues, which we all need to know more about.
Anytime.
Thanks.
By now, most people have been made aware of and adjusted to the fact that billions of microscopic life forms live on the outside and inside of our bodies. But now we're learning that life has settled literally everywhere we look on Earth, and especially where you live. Rob Dunn from the North Carolina State University has written a guidebook explaining some of this overlooked life, called Never Home Alone: From Microbes to Millipedes, Camel Crickets and Honeybees, The Natural History of Where We Live. Molly Bentley of the radio program and podcast Big Picture Science brings us the interview.
I would say, if you would have asked me 10 years ago how many species we would find if we sampled exhaustively 50 houses, I would have said not very many. And when we started this project, we had a clue that might be wrong, but our colleagues thought it was right. And in fact, most of our colleagues thought sampling the arthropods in houses was the dumbest and most boring thing we'd ever thought of. But we went in, and in the first 50 houses, we found at least 1,000 species of insects and their relatives, and probably more like 2,000. The counting in these cases is tricky. And initially, we thought, well, maybe those are still a lot of things that are just blowing in. But the more we look, the more that many of these species were actually adapted for living with us in our homes and have traveled around the world with us and really relate to us in very specific ways. And it sort of opened up a giant world of things to follow up on that we're still sort of immersed in.
Let's say more about where you found them and what exactly you found.
If you really start to look, even right in front of you, there's more than you think there might be. That there are teeny things that maybe part of your brain registers, but your conscious brain isn't paying attention to. And so book lice are these tiny little insects, but they're visible. And if we asked entomologists how many houses we'd find book lice in, and people thought they were now very rare, and we found them in every single house. And so this stuff's there. It's hiding around in the corners. It's flying around. There's a great little wasp that we find in lots of houses. And it doesn't sting people. It's a tiny wasp. And it specializes in laying its eggs in the egg cases of some kinds of cockroaches. And it's really common. And so this must be flying around our houses at night or, even during the day and doing its good service. And we just don't see it.
One of the most memorable graphs in your book is entitled Who Lives in Your Home? And it's a roll call of the arthropods. So these are the insects. So never mind the bacteria. We know there are a lot of them. And this is listed in order of proportion. So the number one species, it's the fly, Diptera.
Yeah.
Okay. So just to give people an idea of what's on here, there are beetles, there are moths, there are mites and ticks, bees and wasps, cockroaches, lice, and the last one are crickets and grasshoppers. These are a lot of different kinds of insects in our homes.
Yeah, it's crazy. So if you think about it, there was an old British study where a guy who I would guess was not married did a study of his own mattress through time, and he just kept sampling his mattress. And he found half a dozen species of mites living in his mattress, eating his dead skin. And then there was a second trophic level of mites eating those mites. And then there was a centipede that would kind of roam around that appeared to be eating the bigger mites. And so that was just in his pillow and mattress. It's a whole world around us.
There's a particular time and space resolution that is called upon for us to see these creatures. So if you're just walking quickly through a room, you won't see them.
And our scale and their scale are so very different, both with regard to time and space, as you point out. And so when you lifted up that plant and you saw those two different bugs, it's possible that they had an enormous population of each of those species in the potted plant. And that's a whole story into and of itself. But we just miss it.
Another example of insects living in surprising places are those drain flies that are in the sink.
Yeah, that's a good one. This is a group of insects that's spread around the world, and we've only sort of noticed that it's happened. And I think lots of listeners will have seen them. They're teeny tiny flies, and they fly out of your drain. And what's happening is that their larvae are actually establishing in the drain itself and helping to break down the gunk in the drain. It's like the Drano you get for free. These flies.
Now, none of this is strange if you look at our ancestral relationship with the outdoors and the evolution of the home. You point out that bathing, for one, is a recent thing. And long before that, we slept outdoors. We slept on the dirt. But as we evolved and we became human, our homes evolved. We moved into simple caves and then rounded domes, you explain. And as we did that, as we built homes, we began to alter the microbial and insect species even 20,000 years ago. And how did we do that?
Well, so a couple things happen. So one is that we start to seal off a little bit of outdoor nature, just a little bit initially. So if you think about cave life relative to life in a stick nest, a lot of the same things are still coming in, but not exactly the same things. And so you can sort of see that as, at least in the Western tradition, largely progressive in quotes, in the sense that we get ever more sealed in. First you have a cave with an opening, and then you have a house with a window and or a door, but they don't seal. Eventually you have a door, you have a sealed window. And as that happens, more and more things are excluded. At the same time, the other thing that's going on then is that more and more species are figuring out, evolutionarily, that we're kind of a dependable place to live, and so if they can figure out how to move in where we live, the conditions are a little bit different. And so we're favoring slowly a different set of species. And so one of my favorite examples of this is that in Mauna, Egypt in 1350 BCE, before the Common Era, we see from archaeological sites many arthropod species that we also see in houses in Raleigh. And that's because those species moved into our houses really early in the history of homes and agriculture and have continued to move with us on ships as we've traveled. And so 1350 BCE sounds like a long time ago, but in the bigger history of mammals, of humanity even, it's yesterday. And so this is a whole new kind of thing in many ways.
So life finds a way, and you write that the evolution of species in our homes is the fastest occurring on Earth.
It is. It is for a number of reasons. One is that if you think about the size of the indoor world we're creating, it's the most rapidly expanding biome on Earth. So the indoors is expanding as the Amazon is retreating, as many kinds of forests are retreating, but the indoors is getting bigger and bigger. And so nature loves habitats that are getting bigger and bigger. And so any species that can do well in that habitat can leave many offspring. And any of those offspring with genes that make them even better at living in that habitat do even better. At the same time, the other thing that we do to speed up evolution is that we use lots of biocides, so insecticides, antibiotics, antimicrobials, herbicides. And all of those disfavor a lot of life, but at the same time favor a subset of species or genes. And so they really speed up evolution. If you go to the store in the aisle with all the killing stuff, many of the containers say kills 99% of insects or 99% of germs. That's like if you were to write out a recipe for how do I make evolution happen really fast and how do I make it favor species I don't want. Killing 99% is like the best way.
And that's the key. You're favoring the species that are tough, and often they tend to be the troublemakers, and you're just wiping out the harmless or the beneficial bacteria and insects in our homes and in our lives.
Yeah, and you're wiping out all the competition for those tough species. I have a friend who works a lot on these sort of industrial pig farms where you have this horrible scene. But if you look at those great big pig farms, one of the places that he's finding lots of bacteria that are super antibiotic resistant is on the really clean floors that are bleached all the time. And what he thinks is happening is that on those floors, those resistant bacteria, which don't survive very well if there's not much antibiotic, they can hang out because all their competition is gone. And so they just hang out there and wait for something to colonize that happens by. And so the same kind of thing in a less extreme setup is happening in our houses.
Rob, what's delightful about your description of your studies is not just the new worlds that are opening up to us as we understand the role of these microbes and these insects in our lives, but it's the sheer enthusiasm and admiration that you have for this diversity of life. And can you say more about why you're in awe of these small creatures?
I think part of my awe is childlike in the sense that I grew up surrounded by nature and fascinated by nature. And when I was a kid, a lot of what I would have seen outdoors around my house in Michigan were actually new phenomena that nobody'd noticed, but I didn't know they were new. And so when I went to college and started becoming interested in biology, I thought I needed to go to the farthest place to find new species and new phenomena. And so I spent most of my early career in rainforests. And over the last few years, I realized that many of the things that I could find in rainforests that we can find in homes, not the same species, but the same potential for new discovery. And that just sort of amazes me because it means that I'd missed these things my whole life and that everyone around the world is missing them. And this possibility that if we could just sort of refocus people on the potential for discovery around them, that we could have wonder-filled lives. And so that captivates me in a really deep and personal way.
To hear from Rob Dunn and the rest of the program and an extensive archive, point your web browser to bigpicturescience.org. Thanks for tuning in to This Just In from Outdoors. Check out our stories and past shows online at newsfromoutdoors.bandcamp.com. I've been your host, Jasmine Albergue. Our headlines were produced by Camille Capasso, Mackenzie Morris, Jasmine Albergue, Nick Seyfried, and Daniel Martinez, with Anthony Leiserowitz of the Yale Center for Climate Communications. The interview with Rob Dunn on The Natural History of Where We Live was produced by Molly Bentley, Seth Shostak, and Gary Niederoff for the SETI Institute's radio program and podcast, Big Picture Science. To hear more, point your web browser to bigpicturescience.org. Thanks again for listening. We'll be here next Thursday at 5 p.m. for another edition. Until then, we'll see you outdoors.
Just bees and things and flowers. Just bees and things and flowers. Sunshine.
Now, young fellas, been having a lot of fun around here today, haven't you? You know what makes this all possible? The forest around us. We should all be thankful for our forest.
This just in.
From Outdoors.